episode of 123 CMMC has been brought to you by A3, an assessment accreditation application developed by CyberDI. A3 is a CMMC cloud-based collaborative environment for an organization seeking certification, OSC, to build CMMC packages and share with a marketplace of consultant, RPOs, and assessor C3PAOs. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. I am Dana Mantilia. I am your host, and I have a very special guest today, and his name is Mike Jones. And he might not have the clearest internet connection, so we can't see his face as clearly as we would like, but it's what he's going to say that's going to be the most important. So he is currently a security researcher. So, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Because I'm sure everybody would love to hear.
Sure. So my background is in SIGINT, in the military, signal intelligence, and I became a hacker and was part of the group Anonymous as a hacktivist. And now I've taken that experience and my journey through the darker side of the web to help children who have been identified as potential cyber criminals choose better paths. Also help acclimate previous offenders back into the cyber world.
That's very good. Very good that you're taking all that knowledge now and showing these kids there's maybe a different path to go down and put this, this lovely talent to some good use, right? For good things.
Exactly.
Okay. So we have a great topic today, which is social engineering. And I think a lot of people don't believe that this actually happens. So I can't wait to get into you sharing all of your tips and tricks and everything you have. So the first question that we have is, how are hackers infiltrating companies?
It's pretty simple, and it never changes. They always look for the lowest, the path of least resistance and the lowest hanging fruit. And usually that is with individuals with the human factor. The human factor plays a big part of how we attack companies and why we attack companies. So usually it's email, phone calls, very simple things. Most people will give up their password to a system in exchange for a candy bar. So you see the low hanging fruit there.
Yeah, that's really. What did you say you did one time? What did you called in? I don't know. You were telling me one way. Give us a couple of examples of what you specifically done.
Sure, absolutely. One way that I would get into companies or find ways to attack companies is I would look at their job postings on job boards and look at the specific types of technology and versions that they use. If it was a rare technology, I would download a manual from the internet, figure out how to operate that system, and go after it. A lot of companies, a lot of detailed information about their operations and about the systems they use, which is a big flaw because you're basically painting the road for a hacker and making that attack map very clear for them.
Yeah, that's a good point. And even, calling up and getting somebody on the phone and pretending you're a vendor and saying, hey, do you use this system or this system? And they say, oh, no, we use that system. Okay, great. I just need to, and whatever, that person forgets they even had that conversation. So little things like that. And another thing that I think is probably helpful is when everybody puts their company directory on their website with who's who, with all the emails right there. So you could just send an email to everybody and see who falls for it.
Exactly, and LinkedIn is a great opportunity for hackers as well because there's so much detailed information on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I never thought about that. Okay, so how can everyday people, or what can everyday people do to control their footprint on the internet? This is a big problem.
It's a very good topic, especially during the pandemic and during lockdown. I saw a huge spike in devices that have eavesdropping capabilities, video eavesdropping capabilities, keystroke logging, devices like Alexa, devices like Chromecast, things that people find as a convenience, but actually increase their risk. So one thing that people can do is when they look at buying devices like this or surveillance cameras or Ring doorbells, look at the risk it poses to the environment. If you can see that video, chances are somebody else can too. At one point, I had infiltrated a numerous amount of surveillance cameras globally. And it's because they sat on the internet and they were exposed. So a lot of people, they just throw it on the network and they just want it to work. It doesn't matter the exposure because in their mind, it's just a video camera. But to me, that's an open door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm curious, like you mentioned Alexa. So how does Alexa help somebody get into their system?
You know, it's very funny because, you know, some of the talks that I've given, you know, since the pandemic and the lockdown, people have their audio turned on. And, you know, I'm sitting there speaking during a conference or giving a talk, and I can hear their Alexa popping up as I mention the word Alexa. So you'd be really surprised to see the type of attacks that can be carried out. So Alexa has what's called a skill set. One of the skill sets that I found recently was an Nmap skill set that helps the attacker actually map out the network. And I'm actually working on an exploit now that adds Metasploit, which is an exploit tool, onto that Nmap skill set. So not only will they be able to map out the internal network, but also launch exploits against devices within the network.
See, that's one thing I don't think people understand really at all, is that if you can get into, you know, the home network through one of these devices, can you explain a little bit about how you can see what else is on there? Like you were just mentioning with the Alexa.
Yeah, absolutely. Once I infiltrate one device, it's easy to just map out the network. I use Nmap and I look at the different devices. I look at different ports that are open, different services, and go from what we do is we call it pivot. So you hit one device and you pivot to the next, whatever that device has a relationship with. Also routers. A lot of people have the home routers that, you know, they don't change the password. And a lot of them have hidden accounts. Comcast was one of them. Comcast had a Comcast technician account that was embedded in the device that was never locked down. The passwords never changed. So I could literally infiltrate business owners through their Comcast router.
Wow. Is that just the home Comcast or the business Comcast? Because they have business phones.
All the above.
Ooh, that's very interesting. Somebody at Comcast might want to know that. Okay, so let's see here now. So you know what else too? What about social media and people posting way too much stuff on social media? Does that help you guys get information about their lifestyle or what they do or who they're associated with or whatever? You know, that's I always wonder about that.
Absolutely. So a friend of mine, Tom Ryan, did a project called Project Robin Sage, where they built a network.
That's okay.
Of different profiles, right? So they built a fake profile and approached different people on the internet, especially on LinkedIn and social media, and solicited their attention. They were going after military officials. They were going after government officials. Do you want me to put the dogs outside?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Just in real life, this happens. Now you get to just sit here and look at me. Mike is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to learning about what goes on inside a hacker's mind. So I think he's got an awesome amount of information to share with all of us. All right, he's coming back. Hear him.
I am so sorry about that.
Oh, don't be silly. Don't be silly. That's what happens
Okay,
now.
So Robin Sage was a very interesting project, and Tom Ryan created a profile of a female cyber analyst. And approach different people in the government, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and even military members. The funny thing with that is when people send photos to individuals like that, there's what we call EXIF data. Within that EXIF data, we can find geolocation, latitude, longitude, time of day. So you get enough people sending photos from that area, and we can map out where those troops are at. So it's really dangerous.
Wow. That's very dangerous. I wasn't thinking you were going there with that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So that's something else that I guess we need to learn too, right? The government.
Limit your social media output, and that goes the same for children too. So when children take photos with their phone, make sure the location is turned off, because that geotag goes into that data, and if they send a photo to, let's say, a predator, they can tell the exact latitude and longitude.
Oh, good grief. I mean, I did a video on Snapchat maps. I thought that was bad enough. That's even worse.
Yeah.
So if they're the location, but how do you know, the phone wants your location on for a million different things. So is it the camera app for the location that you have to? Okay.
Correct.
That's
make sure it's turned. If you're going to take photos, make sure it's turned off so that you don't get that geotag in there.
Very interesting. Okay. Moving right along here. Okay. How do hackers solicit multi-factor authentication answers?
And this goes back to social media as well. So I don't know if you've seen, like, on social media where they have like these games you can play where they ask you, you know, what's your rapper name, and enter this information. So you enter, like, your first car, your mother's maiden name as protection, right? Well, that information gets collected by attackers that created the app. And what do those questions usually go into? Banking applications. Those are your multi-factor authentication questions or security questions. And usually people use the same ones over and over again. So be careful which applications you're using. And, especially like with the phishing and the vishing, people calling up on the phone, acting like the IRS or acting like, law enforcement. You have a warrant, I need this information so we can clear your warrant. People give out way too much information all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely for sure they are. And it's funny that I did a video on those Facebook quizzes too, because I have a lot of friends that love those Facebook quizzes. And that's exactly what I said. I said, you can't stop doing these Facebook quizzes. And then exactly. I said, and I'm glad you just said that too, because I said that they're put together by, by hackers, and nobody believed me. So right out of the horse's mouth there, people. Okay. So here's a good one now. So how to perform an OSINT on contacts.
So OSINT is open source intelligence. And by that, we mean any type of information that's open source, it's out on the web, that's public information. Again, when people post their entire life on social media, they post different things about houses, like on Zillow. There's so much information to be had on each individual. For instance, I did an interview with a CISO not long ago for a position. And before we even had the conversation, I knew what college he went to. I knew what sport he played. I knew his children's names, the location where he was at, the address, everything. But a lot of people don't understand the amount of information that's out there on each individual. A good thing to do as a practice to look at your own security is Google yourself. Look at different pieces of information that exist and do that frequently, because what you're seeing is exactly what we're seeing. And you want to limit that. And there's ways to go about getting certain things off of the internet, especially through Google. It's a very arduous task, but it does help.
So how do you go about that if you find something that you don't want to be on there?
Well, it depends on what it is, right? So I helped an individual one time that had a mugshot on the internet, which is public information, but they really wanted to take it down because it had been years ago. And they were trying to get jobs, and they really didn't want that to affect their employment.
That's understandable.
So there's addresses, like email addresses, you have to email out to Google to request the removal or to have it not cached. And that's really important. And also another problem that I've seen recently is people that have either sent pictures of somebody and those people posted those photos online. And that's a tricky situation, and sometimes it requires legal assistance, but it does happen.
Yeah. Well, that's a good idea. Google yourself. Very good advice. Okay. How do you reduce your home and company network exposure without compromising operations? This is a good one.
This is a really important one, and I talk to companies all the time about this. They use social media platforms. You also have people within the company that are advertising their position within the company, befriending people on the internet, through LinkedIn or whatever. And to be honest with you, LinkedIn has a fair amount of, I call them, nefarious actors, but there are intelligence officers on the internet, on LinkedIn, foreign intelligence that build dossiers. China is very, very prominent when it comes to building dossiers on individuals, and they do that through social media. So again, to limit your footprint, limit the amount of information you put out. Now, as far as your network infrastructure goes, put as little as possible facing the internet. I know that a lot of people use different types of surveillance cameras at home, and they forward that information out to the perimeter of their network so they can connect to it remotely. So one thing to keep in mind is when you set something up in your network to connect remotely, I'm going to connect as well. So people like me look for those types of devices all the time. And there's a website called Shodan that will actually list and spider all those devices. So at one point during the pandemic, I got bored and was messing with Chromecast. So I was curious as to how many devices I could find on the internet that had Chromecast open. And there was 7,000 on one day that I could have infiltrated. And that goes back to misconfiguration. Same thing with surveillance. Same thing with alarm systems. Comcast was really bad about that. be able to view your security systems from external. So anything you can do external, remember that somebody else can do as well.
Wow, that's interesting. I never thought about that. The security cameras that you're then sending to something so that you can watch it on your phone. So that's another risk there, I guess. That's a good point. So now just to go back to some of these smart homes, and maybe we could talk about the pineapple a little bit and what that does and how close you have to get to a house and stuff like that. And is that something we should be worrying about, people walking around with pineapples?
I wouldn't be too worried about people walking around with pineapples. I would be more concerned about drones flying overhead with pineapples.
I never thought about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I did a proof of concept when I lived back in Houston. I lived in a pretty dense populated neighborhood. And I took a Raspberry Pi and added some tools to that Raspberry Pi, and the drone was able to carry that payload. Now with that payload, I was able to map out all the Wi-Fi in the entire neighborhood without even having to leave my house. And on that board as well were different attack tools for Wi-Fi. So you could potentially have your Wi-Fi hacked and nobody would even be walking around. You wouldn't even see them.
Wow, that's a good point. I never thought about the drone. So how do you protect yourself against that happening?
Use encryption, really good encryption on your Wi-Fi access points. Open access points are not the answer. Using WEP is definitely not the answer. WPA is a little bit more difficult, but it's still hackable. My thing is when I talk to individuals that are trying to secure their network and they talk about Wi-Fi, I explain to them that you just using Wi-Fi, you're increasing your risk. And I know that, we are in 2021 and people have a lot of Wi-Fi access points and devices that rely on Wi-Fi. So make sure you're using strong encryption on your access point. Make sure you're using good passwords. Make sure you change those passwords. The more barricades you can put up in front of hackers, the harder it is. One thing to remember as well is that they're very patient. If they really want what you have, they'll wait until you make a minor mistake and take advantage of it.
And this ties into, as far as CMMC with some of the subprime vendors that are doing work for a big prime. And, they think, well, I'm just a little guy. I don't have anything really of any value. What would anybody want from me? Maybe they might go after the big prime contractor. But, and I think that mentality really needs to change, because I would guess you're going to say that would be kind of a way that, the hackers would be going in through the small subcontractors.
So and that brings up a good point, right? So small companies or small contractors, if I want to attack a very large profile target, let's say the CIA, I'm not going to do it from a home network. I'm not going to do it from somewhere that's easily traceable. I'm going to go in through different companies, set up a foothold, move from company to company, and launch an attack from somewhere else. So even though they may not have anything worth a hacker taking, bandwidth is very important. It's expensive as well. And then you get wrapped up into an investigation, and especially I've seen data centers where the FBI has walked in and seized servers because of attacks that were launched from those servers. And talk about destroying operations. When you lose a whole data center like that, it could be really bad.
Yeah, that sounds very bad. Oof. Okay. All right. Well, you were definitely a wealth of knowledge. Is there anything else you want to share with us? I would love to have you back on to do a whole nother series on something else too.
I would love to. Yeah, I'm actually speaking this week with Kevin Mitnick on another conference. So we have a community where a lot of ex-hackers kind of congregate, and people that are trying to learn cybersecurity from these ex-hackers. And we have that 24/7. So, I mean, there are resources out there that people can reach out to people like me who have that knowledge, who have that experience to help them in whatever issues they're encountering.
Well, and the thing is too, is just having you do these videos with me, when people are going through and looking at some of the other videos about, this is a tool that's going to help you, this is going to, and then they're like, I don't really need to do this. There's nobody out there really doing this. And then they can watch and actually hear from you. I think it's very, very telling. So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. So anything else you want to throw out there? Are you good for now?
I'm good.
All right. Well, I would love to have you back again. And everybody out there, thank you so much for watching. And we hope to see you on the next episode of 123 CMMC. Bye-bye. This episode of 123 CMMC has been brought to you by A3, an assessment accreditation application developed by CyberDI. A3 is a CMMC cloud-based collaborative environment for an organization seeking certification, OSC, to build CMMC packages and share with a marketplace of consultant, RPOs, and assessor C3PAOs.